Hello, this is Larry Wagner, and we are going to talk about something very special in my teaching and practice, and that is the concept of the farmhouse. So, this will be our fourth talk in our series of understanding God's design for relationships. I say the farmhouse is special because it's probably been one of the concepts that has resonated with people more than just about anything else I share or have come up with in my experience. Um, so what is a farmhouse? So let me describe it and kind of set it up with some context. I have this memory, somewhat faint, and I'm sure it's been embellished and changed, but I have this memory early on in life of this farmhouse that my grandparents had. And by the time I got there, it wasn't even a working farm, but it was a place of gathering for people, especially in the summers where people would come together and enjoy everything that the farmhouse and the grounds around it had to offer. So let me tie that into how that applies to helping people. And then I'll break down the specific aspects of the farmhouse. So about 26, 27, 28, even maybe close to 30 years ago, that's forever ago, I was in full-time private practice as a psychologist in Atlanta, the Atlanta Counseling Center. And Atlanta in the spring is just gorgeous. Dogwood trees, azaleas. If you've ever watched the Masters golf tournament, it has that feel of everything just coming alive in the spring. And I found that in my practice of seeing people, I would get a lot of single adults coming in the spring, and my caseload would fill up with single adults just aching for that someone they could be in relationship with. And back then, the church singles groups were really just not good. Most of them had sort of a really negative association. So they weren't a very good place for meeting other believers. Some of my people coming in had tried the Buckhead scene in Atlanta. If you know Atlanta, Buckhead is a real popular place for a lot of clubs and gathering. And they found that to be not very fulfilling. And they're just desperate. And this is pre-electronic dating. There was no eHarmony or Christian Mingle or any of the other online dating sites. So these single adults were just hurting for connection. And as I listened and heard their stories, this is where the farmhouse comes in. Because I saw a parallel between their life, their relational life, and the things that happened in the farmhouse. Let me explain. As I mentioned, the farmhouse had some grounds around it. And in the summer as a kid, I have some memories of people gathering. And as a kid who liked to be outside, this was like the best day ever because there would be activities, sports, badminton, volleyball, horseshoes, and you just had people doing different activities, family, extended family, some friends all coming together. And it was just the best thing. And on the grounds or the lawn, which is the first part of the farmhouse we're going to talk about, the lawn, that is where you found people doing fun activities, enjoying each other, just fun. As the day wore on, people would gravitate toward the wraparound porch where the rocking chairs were, and they would be talking about things like the Strawberry Festival at the Methodist Church or the weather or maybe a little bit of gossip, some juicy tidbits that could be shared. And then as if you were to come off the porch, the first room you would come into in this farmhouse is sort of the older homes would have a parlor or a sitting room, a greeting room for people, which was sort of a stiff kind of place where you would have people. Way back in the day, you even had like people who came door to door to sell things. No computers, let alone online shopping. So people come around selling things, and you'd greet them in the parlor. Um, from the parlor, then you'd walk into the living room, which is where the overstuffed furniture was. And this would be a place where you'd hear a lot of laughter. And even as a kid, it was just fun to be in that living room because it had really good energy and fun. And then from there, if you walk what as a kid seemed like a long, narrow hallway, as an adult, it was probably 2 or 3 steps. But it opened up into a big farmhouse kitchen where off to one side was a sort of what we would call today maybe more like an industrial oven and stove. My grandmother was known for her baking, and I guess in today's language she would have been somewhat of a caterer. So if people were having weddings or anniversaries or special events, often she would be called, and my mom and my aunt might help her baking breads and pies and cakes, cookies for these events. And she was known as just a wonderful baker. The other side of that big open kitchen was a kitchen table where you'd find a few people engrossed in pretty deep conversation, solving the world's problems. As a kid, you didn't quite understand it, but you saw that they really meant what they were saying. So how does that fit with my singles in Atlanta? Let me put it together. If we go back to the lawn, we think about what happened on the lawn of the farmhouse is much like the lawn of a relational farmhouse. And so what happens on the relational lawn? You have relationships that are by nature casual. They're activity-based. They're based on shared interests. And they're intentionally superficial. Casual in that it was just be yourself, do your thing, laugh at yourself, laugh at others, revolving around something you were doing together. And superficial, these are the places where singles wanted to go and find out who the big pool of potential people would be, who would be friends and maybe someone even very special from this pool of people. Therefore, you'd find different activity-based clubs and things like that you would go to because you loved the activity, but then you might find some people that would become good friends or maybe some special companions from that group. But very superficial, just sort of scouting things out. If we go to the relational farmhouse porch, then the people that you maybe identified on the lawn as someone who could be worth pursuing a little bit, or maybe you want to know a little bit more about them, it's sort of a selection process that you invite some people from the lawn to the relational porch. Now, you're still outside the house, but you're starting to spend a little more time with this person. Maybe you're in a group of mutual friends and you do things together. Maybe you get together at the pub for trivia night, or you go on whitewater rafting trips, or you do things together in a larger group. These would be some people that you would find on your porch. Still at the superficial level, but a little bit more of a connection because of a shared interest and maybe some just some good personality matching. Then in the relational farmhouse, we see the porch then as a screening process. We see it as finding the people that we have a certain comfort level with. I know that Sue and I met our senior year at Wheaton, and I knew pretty early on that there was something very special about this relationship because she was the first person that I dated that I could be completely comfortable with. Total comfort with her, and that was special. That was different. And so we're doing that screening on the porch of comfort level with this person. And then there's a mutual interest in spending more time together. What we like, what we see, we like, and we want to see more. So everything's a go. We're moving now from the porch, and we're deciding to bring some people into our parlor or sitting room. A couple points to remember here is that relationship connections on the lawn and on the porch are based on what we see about one's ideal self. They're giving us their ideal self-image. This is their best part of station 2, dressed up at their best, is what we want people to see. And so if we start making long-term commitments from porch relationships, we're really setting ourselves up for trouble, because we've only seen their ideal self. And I'm not a fan of short, brief engagements when you don't know someone, or sometimes long-distance relationships. Of course, sometimes they work, and some have been amazing, but for everyone that's worked, there are probably several dozen that didn't. The porch doesn't give you enough information to choose who's going to be a lifetime partner. So what happens then as we enter the farmhouse, the relational farmhouse, by way of the parlor, we're now committing to a process of getting to know each other's real self. And that's why when we talked about station 2, I space, the more I can access the parts of who I am in station 2, the more I can share that with someone else, and the more they can know me, because I'm comfortable sharing that part of me. And I would find that to be true with them as well. So now we're in the parlor. Now we're much more intentional about getting to know the person. If there are any red flags, now's the time to see them. A couple of red flags that we might see would be someone who is very self-absorbed, would be an example of a red flag we'd pick up in the parlor or the sitting room. Another red flag would be someone who's really trying to rush things. They're really trying to move quickly and move the relationship along at a very, very fast pace. We were looking for someone in the parlor who has an appropriate amount of self-disclosure. Not too much too soon, but enough that is comfortable. And so everything's good, no red flags, everything looks good. We're ready to now move to the living room. Remember, the living room is where the overstuffed, comfortable furniture, lots of laughter, relationships in the living room, a relational farmhouse living room, relationships look like a full range of conversation, from very serious to very lighthearted. Mostly on the lighthearted side of just enjoying being together. And we're probably going to be fairly similar in our views, although it's nice to have some people who are seeing things a little differently, just to keep it interesting. What's really nice about our living room friends is they're our hangout friends. They're comfortable. We can just be ourselves. We have some history. We know each other's quirks. We can tease each other and be teased and not take it personally. We can even have some self-deprecating humor. And the living room friends are the best. And they're committed to some degree of regular interaction, maybe online, but ideally some FaceTime as well, of just being together and enjoying hanging out together. Probably the thing that's really nice about the living room friends is you can be yourself. So if I'm looking at the upcoming weekend and I'm thinking, wow, it'd be really nice to do something Saturday night, I'm immediately thinking of my living room friends. I wonder what my living room friends are doing. And ideally, someone within that living room group is a gatherer. They're the one who's sending out the text. Hey, we're meeting at such and such, or we're doing this, or we're going to, hey, this concert is in the park. Let's grab some food and go. These are the people we want to just spend some time with on the weekend. They energize us, they refresh us because they're so fun to be with. Now we move to the kitchen. In the relational farmhouse, the kitchen is where we have the potential for lifelong friendships. Around that kitchen table, that relational space in the kitchen, we find that there's a commitment, a deep commitment to the relationship. This isn't casual. This is you have my back, I have your back. One of the reasons that this person is in my kitchen is because we've probably had some rough patches along the way. We've probably had some what I call misses, like a misunderstanding, misperception, miscommunication. But it didn't destroy the relationship. The miss forced us to have to talk through it. We stayed out of our inner rooms and we talked about it to the point where we found some nice resolution. And, you know, I don't know if I can trust you until I see how you treat me when we have a disagreement. I don't know how I can trust you, or if I can trust you, until I see how you treat me when we have a disagreement. Our kitchen friends are people we've had the disagreement with, and we've worked it through, and now the trust is stronger, and the relationship has a beautiful bond where we know that if we do have a miss or something comes up, we are committed to and have the capacity to resolve it well. So that makes these friendships very special. And even with kitchen friends, we may be apart for a while. Maybe we don't have opportunities to stay in touch as much as we would like. Our FaceTime, maybe our Zoom calls are short and not as frequent, and maybe we don't have a chance to be in the same location. But you know what happens? Once we re-engage, we pick right up where we left off. And I've had this happen with kitchen friends that are from way back in my past, that suddenly a group of us would get together and it's like we didn't miss a beat. We picked up with our relationship. That's a kitchen friend. If I'm in trouble for whatever reason in the middle of the night and I call them, they're there. Whether it's with a financial bailout, some kind of emergency help, a kitchen friend is a lifelong friend that I can lean on and depend on and is there for me. It's a really special thing to have, some kitchen friends. Then the one other room that I didn't talk about yet in that relational farmhouse is the pantry. And my grandmother's farmhouse with her baking, she had a walk-in pantry where she kept some of the things that she baked, the preserves, canned goods. I would pick the apples. My mom and aunt and grandmother would make the applesauce, the apple butter, the apple pies, and so forth. That walk-in pantry was a very special place because everything in the relational farmhouse is kept there. The things there are the most sacred parts of who we are. These are the very deepest, most honest parts of who we are there in our relational pantry. Therefore, it's reserved only for someone who has entered into a covenant of a lifelong marriage or commitment. I don't let anyone just come into the pantry because it is sacred. It has to be someone who has made a lifetime commitment to me. And usually we think of that as marriage because I don't want to give all of myself, all of my heart, soul, mind, everything to someone who's not going to handle it well. And people have been burned. They've thought they had a pantry commitment, but then someone violated that commitment And that's one of the most painful things that we could ever go through, to have given everything to someone who then betrays that and cheapens it. It's just excruciatingly painful, and many people have had to live through that. So those are the rooms. Now, we've got a few principles here with the farmhouse that I want to share with you that are, to me, incredibly helpful, because I often get the question, how do you know if this is the right person? Or how do you know if I should pursue this relationship? Or what should I look for in a potential partner? Well, we've already talked about a teachable spirit after, in addition, right below a heart for God. But here are some principles that I really strongly encourage people to follow in their relational farmhouse. Principle number 1. When I grew up, my brother's 6 years older than me, and he enjoyed teasing me a lot. And I was a hothead, hot-tempered, and he would take great pleasure in just holding his arm out as I swung wildly to try to get to him. And as I grew a little bit, I could sort of go after him a little bit more, and it wouldn't be uncommon for us to be chasing each other throughout the house, and somewhere in a pretty small home we grew up in, but we would hear my mother, usually in the kitchen, yelling, "No running in the house." And the same is true for the relational farmhouse. Time, please hear this, time is needed in each room in order for trust to be developed. No running in the relational farmhouse. When we move to the next room, when do we know? How do we know? Our second principle then is we move because we have a parallel disclosure. Remember I talked about appropriate disclosure? Now it's a parallel disclosure, that I share some of my story, some of my life. The other person, in this case Sue, shares some of her life. She shares some, I share some, and we move in a parallel fashion with our emotional, recreational, spiritual, physical intimacies are moving in a parallel fashion. When that's working well, we know we can move to the next room. If it's not working well, what if someone's sharing a lot and the other person's holding back? What we would tell this person is stop sharing, stop talking, and let this person catch up. But what if they don't? What if they don't want to catch up? Well, that's unfortunate, because at that point you know this relationship is not going to go very far. And in fact, the person who shared a lot is at risk for really getting hurt, because this other person has a lot of ammunition to use against them if there is a misunderstanding or some sort of disagreement. So don't get way ahead of someone. Sometimes there's this, I found this person that's going to be the infatuation, everything looks great. I found this person, let's go. No running and parallel disclosure are so important for knowing how to progress in the farmhouse. Third principle, the deeper you go in, the deeper you go into the farmhouse, the fewer the people, which makes sense. I can't have the same amount of people I have on the lawn in my living room. There's not space. So the fewer the people, the further I go into the house. And this is something I've seen a lot, this principle number 4, with working with young couples. Once you go deep into the house, and we often think of that as going in physically deep, it's very difficult to back up and be satisfied at an earlier room. I can't tell you how many young couples I've worked with who could have had an amazing relationship, but they violated the farmhouse principles and found that they had gone in too far too fast and tried to back up, but it didn't work. It doesn't work. It's really hard. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's really hard to back up and be satisfied in the previous room after you've had a glimmer of what was available in a deeper room. And so extra care there to make sure that the pacing is right. And then finally, this is so helpful for people who have had their pantry not treated well. And that is that each season the pantry gets cleaned up and restocked. What does that mean? That if you shared your pantry with someone who was not a lifetime partner, you're not doomed to never have the pantry experience. That pain and the damage, with time, with care, maybe with counsel, with good friends, that can be cleaned up and restored and prepared for something that would be a true lifetime commitment and partner. We have to be real careful here that we don't just say, if you've been there once and it didn't go well, then too bad. That's not the case. It can be restored and it can be replenished through much grace and healing and forgiveness. And so those are the rooms of the farmhouse, and those are the principles. I hope they'll give you some guidance in how you progress in a relationship, how you know that the person that you're wanting to maybe consider as someone who has potential to be a lifetime partner. If you can go through the farmhouse with the pacing that I'm recommending in these principles, it's not a full proof guaranteed, but it sure is a much better way of trying to protect what is sacred and important, and not encounter some of the deepest hurts that happens when you run through. Running through means often that there's going to be a lot of emotional pain. So hopefully these will help you. They've been a comfort and a help to a lot of people over the years, and maybe you'll find something there that is of value in your understanding of relationships and how they progress.